This is Hal Shurtleff, your host of Camp Constitution Radio. Camp Constitution Radio is brought to you by Camp Constitution. Among other things, Camp Constitution runs an all-volunteer family camp. This year's camp will be from July 12th to the 19th. Beautiful Sunday to Sunday in beautiful Rindge, New Hampshire. And for more information about the camp, you can go to campconstitution.net. I'm going to have a special guest today on the phone, but just to let you know, this show is heard on WBCQ The Planet, shortwave, every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The station is located in beautiful Monticello, Maine, in Aroostook County. And in addition to the summer camp program, Camp Constitution has a press, a publishing arm. We've published a number of reprints, some timeless classics. We've got George Washington's farewell address. We have the Davy Crockett story, Sockdolager. We've actually published some things on our own. One of them is a recent book called Gems from the Gem Years, written by Bettina Dobbs, and we're going to be actually having a time in Maine at Rockland, at the Rockland Library, this coming Saturday, March 21st at 2 o'clock. We're going to be just reminiscing about the great organization that Bettina Dobbs started back in 1978 and the wonderful impact that it had on the lives of many families in Maine and other parts of the country. And we'll also be promoting her book, Gems from the Gem Years. We published a book back in a few years ago that was originally published in the, I think it was 1810. It was by Noah Webster. And the book refuting global warming. Noah Webster, the famous lexicographer and statesman, he was, we can say, a founding father. He wrote an essay refuting global warming. He didn't call it global warming in those days, and they actually thought it was a good thing that the weather was getting warmer in the winter, but he used the Old Testament and the New Testament for weather patterns, as well as diaries of farmers and so forth. That book is available on the Camp Constitution bookstore on the website, many other things. And if you're interested in helping our camp program, helping this radio get a larger audience, you can become a camp sponsor. Really, any donation, especially if you're a business, will list you on the sponsors page. Just contact us. Our guest is online here, and before I bring him on, I just want to give a quick introduction. Dr. Kishore is originally from India. He came here in the early 70s, and he is probably the nation's, if not the world's premier edicologist. He may have been the first one, and he has studied. He's got more degrees than a thermometer, and he is the man who designed the Massachusetts model. I just wish he had a cure for my cough, which successfully treated drug and alcohol addicts. And anyway, welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you for having me.
Well, I got a chance to meet you. You came to a couple of video showings that an organization was having dealing with America, Imagine a World Without Her, by Dennis D'Souza, who had been one of your countrymen, a U.S. citizen who came over from India, and he got in some trouble with the federal government dealing with some type of campaign finance, and they put him in handcuffs and fined him. And you told me that you had a story to tell, and then I got a chance to get to know you a little better, and your story would make his story look like a jaywalking. So let's talk a little bit about yourself. And we only have a half an hour. Keep that in mind. So, and then what happened? I mean, talk about your successful clinics and the model, Massachusetts model, and then what happened? The heavy hand of the state government here in Massachusetts.
Right. I think
took you out.
Addiction is a major problem. When I came in here, it was not such a major problem, but I came to this country in '77, trained at the Washingtonian Center, one of the oldest addiction programs, And
Now, you told me the Washingtonian Center was founded by George and Martha Washington and Dr. Benjamin Rush.
is correct. The philosophy and ideology originated in the early 1800s, and it took root in around 1830, and it had quite a reputation in those days. 150 centers across the country. They called them Washingtonian homes in those days, and they treated alcoholics and addicts in their homes, and they really had a great success rate. They got people sober with the help of pastors. And the last one that survived was in Boston, and I became the medical director there. I cut my teeth in the old traditions, and I enhanced it by creating a program that based on sobriety and spirituality rather than medicating people. The model was called the Massachusetts model. It involves getting people sober without using narcotics, and then maintaining their sobriety without using any mind-altering, mood-altering substances. And people did great.
And your model treats the whole body, not just. You mentioned when you spoke at a presentation recently, you mentioned the three other models, and these all basically either dry you out, but it doesn't treat the whole body. And you pointed out that an alcoholic or a drug addict is a sick body. It's not just the heroin or cocaine or the booze that they're ingesting, but they've got vitamin deficiencies, they've got mental deficiencies. So you treat the whole, almost what I guess they call it, holistic approach. Is that the right term?
We have to. There is no other way to treat addiction except to embrace the person who's been hurt and take care of them body, mind, and spirit and soul. If you don't do that, they'll go back. That's why success rates for addiction are so miserable in other programs. They were less than 2 to 5% sobriety at 1 year. All the investment, goes down the drain when people relapse and they get abandoned. You can't do that.
Now, when I met you, we sat down over breakfast, and I made reference to the medical mafia. And I became aware of that, two things. It was a book called A World Without Cancer, written by Edward Griffin, who also wrote a book on the Federal Reserve Bank. And he talked about the chemical cartels. He talked about the Flexner Report from 1905 and how the chemical companies under the Rockefeller controlled people basically took over the medical schools, set up the FDA, kind of go after the natural medicine people, the homeopaths and the naturopaths to promote chemicals, and it's big pharma, big business. And then when my wife we had a legitimate case when one of my daughters was born. My wife had some nerve damage, and it was a result of the epidural, and we filed a suit, and it was legitimate. We weren't asking for $1 billion. We were just asking for really modest amounts, pain and suffering and what have you. And it was so difficult. We were told that you couldn't get any doctors within greater Northeast to test. You had to go to the Midwest to find somebody, and it was just a horrible ordeal, and we ended up having to drop the case. And so I got my hands full of this, and you created this model that was pennies on the dollar. It saved the taxpayers thousands, millions of dollars for all the people you treated, and then they went after you. So explain the success rate and your clinics, and then the justification to why the state went after you.
The contrast between what I did and what was happening when I started my practice in 1991, 2 to 5% of the people who went to a detox or a rehab were staying sober, whereas in my practice, close to 37% were staying sober. The reason is very simple. We started with the very first thing that people don't like, which is withdrawal. Coming off of drugs is not easy, or alcohol is not easy. They get the horrors or the delirium tremens. And I had a successful, that's my name to fame. I took care of them without sending them to a hospital, and I took care of them outpatient. And they loved it. They liked the fact that they were treated well. And then the second part of the program was the sobriety maintenance. We heard of methadone maintenance, where they give drugs and maintain them for life. I did the same thing with sobriety maintenance, getting people sober and keeping them sober. I developed techniques to do that using basically surveillance, surveillance of the disease, drug testing, urine testing, and cold calling. We figured out a way to keep them on the thin and narrow for 3 to 6 months. Once people got sober and stayed sober for 3 to 6 months, they have to say, I like this. I like my sobriety. To do that, we created a community, with churches, pastors. Bishop Hogan was part of the program. We would bring in pastoral students from Harvard Divinity School to give them the nurturance, spiritual nurturance. And next thing you know, they became rock stars. They began to stay sober, and every time they went to an AA meeting, I would get 10 more patients. It was unheard of for an addict to stay sober for that long without relapsing. Then I began to treat them in primary care, not in psychiatry, keeping them, giving them medical care. Whatever the problems are they accumulated when they were using drugs, either it be hepatitis or carditis. I took care of all of those things, and they loved it. They have a safe system, but at the same time we were doing surveillance. So, see, usually when people slip, slide, or relapse, we don't want them to get to a full-blown relapse. It's basically got to go back to the ground zero and start all over again. So we caught them before they slipped by urine testing and hair testing and saliva testing and blood testing. We have a very sophisticated approach to recognizing the early signs of drinking or drugging. And bingo, we had a wraparound service. We called it the wraparound service. So they did great. They did great, and their families came in. We had a family practice. We educated the families, and next thing you know, people blended back into the fabric of the society. We didn't see them as an addict. We saw them as another fellow human being who is back on track.
Now, how many people did you treat?
Well, over the course of the practice, my practice was from 1991 to 2011, and we treated close to 250,000 patients.
250,000 patients. This is just in Massachusetts?
This is just in Massachusetts, though people came in from contiguous states. We had people from Connecticut, a little bit, Vermont, because our sites were closer to these borders, state borders.
And how many clinics did you have around Massachusetts?
We had a total of 52.
52 clinics.
52 clinics, and community friendly. We are in the local communities. We hired local. We hired people from the same area, so they knew the culture, and they adopted to the ecology. I call it ecology, for want of a better word.
Right.
So each community has its own idiosyncrasies. For example, in Malden, in Martha's Vineyard, most of my patients were middle-aged women, and they wanted
really?
Acupuncture clinic. We gave them an acupuncture clinic 12 to 1 twice a week. It's like the social hour. They came in after they put their kids to the bus to school or whatever, and then they stayed for an hour. That's a sobriety mechanism.
And by the way, drug addiction doesn't seem to have a favorite racial group or economic group. It sort of goes after all, right? Rich, poor, middle class.
Right. All of us have an addiction potential. We're all on the same bell curve, except one person might take one drink, another person might take 1,000 drinks. So we all can get addicted. There's no human being who is who can safely use drugs and come back to safety. All of us have potential. The question is, how do we know who has the highest risk and who has the lowest risk? If we know that, one of us will get the Nobel Prize. We don't know how to calculate the ratio yet.
Right.
So we have to treat people with equal care and caution. Similar to what I call is a light thing, we go to safety. We don't stand in the open areas. So we basically have to do prevention is the best medicine.
Right. So you treated you and your staff treated over a 250,000 people. That's a whole lot of folks. And then what happened in 2011? That seemed to be when things started unraveling.
Right. By 2010 October, I was the top of the heap. I was nationally recognized as a leader in addiction medicine. I got awards. My model was recognized by the National Institute of Drug Abuse as one of the 4 models of care. I went to Europe to tell them about my model. And then when I came back, I found myself under attack by the...
By the way, the Boston Celtics recognize you too, Heroes Among Us, right?
Right. In 2004, they had an award for me. And I got varieties of recognition. But what happened in 2011 is a travesty of justice. Because of the enormous number of people who were coming, the state-sponsored methadone cartel and the Suboxone cartel were not getting enough patients. They were left without any patients because people were staying sober, happily, living their lives, and they stimulated somebody to attack me. They formulated a grand jury, and next thing you know, we had varieties of investigations which we thought we can pass through. But all of a sudden, on September 20th, 2011, in the middle of the night, a SWAT team came to my house, including 20 state police troopers, 13 Brookline police troopers, dogs. They treated me like a drug lord or something.
They probably would have treated a drug lord better than you. And I know this is radio, so they can't see you. You're about, 6'9", 300 pounds. You are a 10th degree black belt, Special Forces Delta operative, and you are proficient in every single conceivable small arms. Is that correct?
Exact opposite. I'm 5'8", 190 pounds.
Yeah,
mild-mannered doctor. So they took me out with all kinds of chains and took my shoulder out of place. And this is the strangest thing that happened to me. And next thing you know, the next day they had varieties of newspapers, TV stations, all covering this arraignment. All the publicity hurt my company, and I had to close it. I couldn't keep it open. And the next thing you know, all these people who were sober, 2,300 people who were staying sober with my help, were converted to methadone maintenance patients the very next day.
I wonder how many people have died after they shut down your clinics. Because I remember just recently I heard a story on the radio saying that there's been an inordinate amount of drug overdoses in the South Shore and here and there. And in New Hampshire, just last week, or actually earlier this week, I guess the person at the Department of Health was talking about the heroin or the drug epidemic too. And you say you treated people in New Hampshire, so I wonder, for the sake of what the medical mafia going after you, I think they'd rather see people die. And you hate to say something like this, but what other conclusions can one draw? They'd rather see you shut down and people die than see you be successful and these people lose money.
It makes me so upset when we talk about all these deaths because there are 46 deaths happening every single day. It's not just an epidemic; it's a crisis. It's a panic.
Now, is this in Massachusetts alone or in the region?
It's in the region, around 46 deaths. Massachusetts probably averages about 10 to 12 deaths of those.
A day.
A day.
Of overdose. So you do that.
Yeah.
And if you multiply that by 365 days, that's a lot of folks.
That's a lot of folks. We have outbeat motor vehicle accidents, fires, injuries. It's the number one cause of death in the state.
And if you look at, like I say, someone who's high or drunk, and they get so sometimes they're not just hurting themselves; they're hurting a lot of other people, physically hurting them through accidents or what have you. And if they can't afford the drugs, they have to go out and steal or rob people and hurting others. So the consequences are really hard but you can imagine the economic and physical consequences of just shutting down your clinics.
Absolutely right. I think these are young adults. Keep in mind, these are not older people who suddenly got into addiction. These are young adults in the prime of their life. They're 17, 18. They're about 13 at least 20 years. They live up to 30, 40.
Wow.
And they die. And they, if you look at the 100 addicts coming in the door, and you measure their longevity in about 10, 20 years, half of them will not exist if they don't get the care. Some of them take their own lives. A quarter of the people who die take their own lives because
really
they cannot get away from this monster, the cunning beast. And a quarter of them will be killed by the drug dealers because to be an addict, you need other people to help you. You need a runner, you need a mule, you need a lookout, an informant. It's like a business operation.
Well, it's kind of interesting. So interesting that the medical mafia didn't like you, and the dope pushers didn't like you either, right? Because you're taking customers away from them. So it looks like the state and also the drug dealers, the ones that the state is supposed to fight, they took you out and you helped. They benefited
Right.
both groups, right?
Right.
Yep.
Drug dealers in general are not organized. They're small people who are trying to make a living, and they're not organized as the state is. State is organized with that's why we call it the medical industrial complex.
Well, they have the guns and they have the courts and they have the jails. That's what they have in their favor.
Absolutely.
So, by the way, you're listening to Camp Constitution Radio, heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sponsored by Camp Constitution, campconstitution.net. Okay, so they arrested you in the middle of the night with a little bit of overkill. It's like using an elephant gun to kill a mosquito. And they charged you with what, about 35 to 40 counts?
Initially, it's only one count, but they expected me to go away for pretrial detention. They wanted $1.5 million bail. Fortunately, I was able to get out with the help of my lawyers, and then I was starting my practice again, and they rearrested me 2 weeks later to put up some more charges, and the publicity really killed my practice, and I couldn't survive. It's a very interesting story. For people who want to read it, they should go to chalcedon.edu. Or
why don't you spell that out so people can hear it clearly? It's a Chalcedon. There's actually been about 5 or 6 stories about your and is there a book coming out about your experiences too?
It's getting there. I think we have people writing it. There are 2 websites, kishorestory.info and chalcedon.edu. They have done a good job of covering it from different angles.
You can also go to my YouTube channel, Hal Shurtleff, on YouTube, and you can find the presentation you gave just a few weeks ago on the subject. You and Massachusetts attorney Greg Hession, who was actually writing a story about it in the New American, yet to be published. I don't think it's come out yet. The New American magazine will be just talking about. And I am sure it's just what you experienced is something that many other Americans all over the country have experienced to various degrees. So it's just an example at the state level or at the federal level of the overreach of the federal state governments and how they're able to get away with what they get away with.
Here, the concerning issue is we are dealing with the young children in the prime of their life, and the society has a duty to protect. So protecting the kids, we're making them fodder for the methadone clinics, Suboxone clinics, the detox industry. It's a self-perpetuating monster that we created.
So where do you stand right now? Where's your case stand at this point? Because you were under house arrest. You told me you had to wear a bracelet, an anklet that caused some kind of physical ailment as well, right? You had radiation on you, basically.
Right. I was on it for 1,400 days, and it affected my health, just like a cell phone affects the hearing. The bracelets on the ankle affect your and trying to clear my name. I did not. The charges are pretty interesting too. What they charged me with is co-locating my practice inside sober houses and co-employing people from the sober houses. Both of these are acceptable parts of the federal regulation called safe harbor rules, and fortunately or unfortunately, they're part of the Obamacare rules too. To enhance the care, you have to co-locate your practice wherever your patients are. So I have done things that are approved and legitimate, and they charge me with a crime for that. That I bribed the people to get the business, which is jaw-dropping.
So you're facing. You anticipate all these charges will be dropped, and hoping that you'll be cleared. Would you think you'll be able to reopen these clinics if you're totally exonerated?
Absolutely. I think there is enough of a groundswell of interest. People want this, especially considering the fact Governor Baker has declared it a crisis, and he wants something to be done. And they're holding hearings all across the state, and everybody should go to these hearings to hear the extent and depth of the problem. I was in Worcester the other day for the first hearing. I testified there, and the judge, juvenile court judge, was telling stories about 13, 14-year-old young children living with the drug dealers in huts in some parks or faraway places, abandoning their homes. We got young children getting pushed into prostitution and the drug trade. We have the soft underbelly of the society is getting exposed here, and we can get hurt. We're already seeing child abuse. We are seeing an element of elderly abuse, home invasions. We've got to be careful and cautious. The social fabric is not ripped.
So anyway, so people, we got about 2 minutes left here, so we can wrap things up. If people are interested in learning more about the case and maybe what they can do, and I don't think it matters where they live in the country, because your model was treating people everywhere. It wasn't just being treated people in Massachusetts. They can go to Chalcedon, the Chalcedon Report, CHALCEDON. That's a Christian-based organization. And they could find it, just do a search for your name. It's Dr. Kishore, and they get a series of articles detailing your case. And YouTube, there's actually your videos been up by a couple of Bill McNally at The Remnant Man on YouTube, or my YouTube channel, Hal Shurtleff. You'll be able to see the presentation there. And you actually are giving. You're still doing presentations. You're going to be doing things. You're doing things down at the the New Testament Church in Cedarville, Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Right. I've been appointed the Minister of Health and Healing by the Bishop of Massachusetts, Dr. Hogan, and Dr. Samuel Hogan, and I've been going through various churches to help people get an understanding of addictions, getting a sense of how to navigate through this broken system.
Well, we're out of time. We have to let you go. But I want to thank you for coming on the show, and we'll touch maybe after maybe in a couple of months when more information is available. We'll bring you back on. So God bless you, and thanks for coming on. And you're listening to Camp Constitution Radio on WBCQ The Planet. Good night, and God bless.
Good night, and God bless.